go to Revelation chapter 12. Hold on to your hats. Does anybody remember this apocalyptic looking beast that was erected outside the United Nations building in New York back in 2021 in honor of peace and safety? Or peace and security? Well, we will be getting into some interesting things this evening. We might be getting into saying don't drink the Kool-Aid. What else? We will probably go ahead and debunk Preterism and some false views of Revelation, such as Preterism. And we may talk about the beast, of course, the beast of Revelation and the dragon, and what are we dealing with. We'll look at some church history. But let's go ahead and begin with a little introductory tune. Then we'll open with prayer. And then we will get into it. Let's see if I can figure out how to get this started here. Wow, flipped around the opposite way. I don't know how that happened. Shalom Wind Feather, and that's a good reminder if anyone would like to give to the Widow Fund. If you donate by scanning the QR code or simply going to the description of the video, you'll see ways to do that, as Wind Feather could potentially be living at campground or in her truck, or simply homeless if she is not able to secure this new living situation by the end of July. So please comment Widow Fund if you donate, so that I know that that goes directly to her, as she will only have her current address for me to be able to get that check out to her for a little while longer, as she is old school and doesn't have all the electronic ways of giving that I have. That's the reason we're doing it that way, as opposed to any of this GoFundMe stuff. So my apologies to anyone who would rather it be anonymous, or that to have me not know about it or something along those lines, but that's just the only way that I knew how to do that. And so thank you for that. And we're going to be getting into some exciting things. Revelation chapter 12. We will debunk Preterism. We'll go over some church history. I got my notes here in front of me. I came prepared. We just might be able to get into how about don't drink the Kool-Aid, and maybe something from even Candace Owens that she shared about Kent Hovind and the tentacles of Rome. We'll be talking about Rome and the beast, and some other interesting things here as we get into our opening. But let's open in prayer. Shalom to Elizabeth as well. And let's go ahead and open with prayer. Heavenly Father, Yahuwah Elohim, I do thank you so much for these studies that we are able to engage in together in the book of Revelation. I pray that you reveal something new and fresh to us, and you just help us know how to be prepared for the events that seem to be unfolding in front of us, that were prophesied of in the pages of Scripture. Help people know how to be prepared, and most importantly, stay close to your commandments, your instructions as taught to us through Messiah Yahushua HaMashiach. And it is in his name we ask these things, and that you bless the listeners, continue to help Windfeather secure a living situation, and in Yahushua's name we pray, amen. Okay, and so here we go, and I do think I'll start out there, as we're going to be reading in Revelation 12, start to get to this dragon symbol. And what was the first century concept and understanding? What would they have thought of when they heard a dragon in John's time of writing the book of Revelation? Well, of course, we'll see the dragon, the devil, obviously. Satan, the devil, the serpent, the dragon. But also the worldly kingdom, and Rome utilized the dragon as a military symbol during the era of the New Testament. 1st century AD. The Romans called it the Draco. The Draco. And so we know there's a constellation in our star stories known as Draco. the dragon. So that's interesting. We need to think about that as we read Revelation 12. What it was, the Roman Draco. The Draco was a cavalry standard consisting of a metal open-mouthed dragon or serpent head mounted on a pole with a long, colorful fabric tube attached to the back. How it worked: as a Roman cavalryman rode at a gallop, the wind would blow into the metal head and inflate the cloth tail, causing it to slither in the air and emit a shrill whistling sound designed to terrify enemies. And so even the Roman military, something along these lines, as they rode on the horse, they would have this kind of the dragon symbol as their standard or ensign, or a symbol of to strike fear into their opponents. So as we go to read about the dragon, we need to think about that. And, you know, we've just gotten done with Revelation 11, and we will talk some about, we'll get into Preterism a little bit, as it could be very tempting to look at Revelation 11 and say, well, that's starting to sound very much as though this may have been fulfilled in the 1st century, and Jerusalem was Babylon, and that city that got destroyed in 70 AD, and this is all a long lost history, and maybe the Antichrist Nero sat up in the temple and exalting himself as God that Paul talked about. And, you know, so you have Jerusalem being Babylon in the 3.5-year period, and the 2 witnesses. That's what we just read about in Revelation 11. And I'm going to steer us away from that interpretation, as we'll explain shortly. Oh yes, and I have the dreadful beast that was, if anyone remembers, erected in 2021 in the background and outside of the United Nations building in New York, in honor of peace and safety, peace and security. Just wondered if anyone remembered that. So a lot of fun things to talk about. Let's go ahead and first, let's see what Revelation 12 says, thinking of Draco, the dragon. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. There certainly does seem to be a connection to Messiah's birth here. I think that we have to admit that. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Notice we're talking about signs in heaven. Oh, good. Elizabeth remembers. Nice. And behold, a great red dragon. So Draco the dragon, we remember, keeping that in mind, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And so we need to begin to try to decipher this dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. And this has a footnote of a bunch of scriptures at the bottom, but one of the main ones is going to be Daniel. And so we're going to look at tonight what the so-called church fathers, what they believed was being referred to, and how they were not preterists, but they were historicists in their interpretations. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. Draco is quite a large constellation and has been calculated to stretch along a third of the stars in heaven, which, and the woman travailing in birth, we have to be thinking of Virgo, the Virgin, and what these might symbolize. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto Yahuwah and to his throne. So who ascends up to heaven to the throne? This could only be Messiah. Of course, you have the funny ideas of the pre-trib rapture people saying, oh, that's the church being taken out of the tribulation. But this pictures Messiah's birth. And interestingly, this sign being clothed with the sun towards sunset and the moon at her feet, this can only occur, interestingly, during the fall feasts in the 7th month on the biblical calendar, September-October time period. So that maybe plants us to a time period of Messiah's birth. And we even saw what seemed to be this sign occur in 2017 in the heavens, that some of the astronomers were able to look at. They called it the Revelation 12 sign in heaven. So continuing, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of Yah, that they should feed her there 1,260 days, 1,260 days. We saw reference to this same time period of 42 months of 30 days in chapter 11. That would be 1,260. By the way, making months be 30-day periods, which supports the Zadok Dead Sea Scrolls calendar. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called, here's the dragon, obviously called the devil, or the old serpent called the devil and Satan. So the great dragon, Draco the dragon, is also known as the serpent, the devil, and Satan. It interprets it for us here. Which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come Yeshua, or salvation, and strength, and the kingdom of our Yah, and the power of his Mashiach. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our Yah day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the male child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. And we'll try to talk a little bit about what this would be, translating it to be 1260 years as opposed to just days. Prophetically, it would be years. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. This gives us clue, the woman and her seed. This has to be Israel. Or the ones which guard the commandments of Yahuwah and have the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach. This has to be the ones who are of the seed of the woman, who we may think of as the woman of Israel, or even the Virgin Mary, who birthed Messiah, was caught up to heaven, and we are grafted into Messiah, so we are the woman's seed or offspring, but only when we're keeping the commandments of Elohim and the faith of Messiah Yahushua. And so when we look at Revelation 11, what will usually be thought of are either 2 witnesses in the time of Emperor Nero that prophesied, and Jerusalem was destroyed as the harlot city of Babylon by 70 AD. That's the preterist view. Nero being the Antichrist. And the problem about Nero being the Antichrist is it's supposed to be the brightness of the coming of Messiah, which at least full preterists will say he already came. That Messiah has to destroy the Antichrist with the brightness of his coming. Well, the problem with Nero being that is Nero committed suicide, so that's not exactly Messiah destroying him if he committed suicide. And the other is the futurist, that, well, this is the Antichrist is going to set up a reign in Jerusalem in the future, in the tribulation, in the end times, and the 2 witnesses come, and a lot of people will say in the pre-tribulational rapture will rapture out the church, and that's the futurist view, and that's what you have a lot of people thinking about now that would hold that position. That's probably the most popular, but Preterism has been gaining popularity, and so, but in order for Messiah to have returned and the Antichrist to have already came on the scene, and for this book of Revelation to have had to have been written before 66 AD, so that the 3.5 year period could happen, and the two witnesses and all of that could happen after John wrote this, and then Babylon supposedly be destroyed, and that be Jerusalem, and the Antichrist Nero being in the temple and it being destroyed by 70 AD, and Messiah returning and destroying him, even though he didn't. He committed suicide. That we would have to see evidence of this in historical writings, in the church fathers' writings, or how about the people, the ones who shook hands with John? And let's look at some of these testimonies. Let's see where to start. Is it that one? Hippolytus of Rome, 170 to 235 AD, famously testified that the Apostle John was banished to Patmos by the Emperor Domitian, during whose reign John saw the apocalyptic vision and wrote his gospel. This is found on the 12 Apostles. Hippolytus explicitly wrote, John again in Asia was banished by Domitian the king to the Isle of Patmos, in which also he wrote his gospel and saw the apocalyptic vision. So Hippolytus directly tells us that that it was under Domitian's reign, which was in the 90s AD. That would have been, Jerusalem would have already been destroyed. And if that be the case, obviously it's impossible that Revelation was referencing anything about the destruction of Jerusalem, because it would have already occurred when John even received this. It was after the fact of that, so it must refer to the future. And in agreement was Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, and Origen, or Origen, however you say that name. We're in agreement with this. So there are very good reasons for the dating of the book of Revelation to around 95 AD, a whole 25 years after the destruction of Jerusalem. This is the Epistle of Barnabas, apocryphal work. I don't consider inspired, but it at least gives us some insight. And this was written around 100 AD. And it shows that in the Epistle of Barnabas, one thing it shows about the book of Daniel, which we need to know, the book of Daniel's prophecies of the beast. It says, and the prophet also speaks thus, the 10 kingdoms shall reign upon the earth, and a little king shall rise up after them, who shall subdue under one 3 of the kings. In like manner, Daniel says concerning the same, and I beheld the 4th beast, wicked and powerful, dreadful, in Daniel chapter 7, more savage than all the beasts of the earth, and how from it sprang up 10 horns, and out of them a little budding horn, and how it subdued under one 3 of the great horns. The Epistle of Barnabas reveals that the writer did not view the Antichrist as having come, but still to come out of the 10 horns. which we just read about, the dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. And so we have to understand the beasts. And there's going to be, the beast is going to be in Revelation chapter 13. That is also talked about back in the book of Daniel. And if we realize the book of Daniel, then we realize some of Daniel still needs to be fulfilled. Preterists will also make the book of Daniel all done and complete and nothing to apply to us now. So another interesting thing about the Epistle of Barnabas to mention is this is the primary work where we get the concept of what 6,000 years on earth equating to 6 days, 1,000 years per day, and then one last day, the 7th day, being another 1,000 years, for a total of 7,000 years of history on the earth. The Epistle of Barnabas is one of the key works that talks about that and says that that would be the case. And so that shows you right there, it was a well-established, it wasn't out of the ordinary or an unheard of idea that they had a concept of Messiah not returning for 2,000 years from that time. So just important to say, hey, in 100 AD, when this was written, they thought that Messiah could potentially return 2,000 years from his first coming. As you have preterists saying, oh, Messiah said he had to come shortly, and that he just had to come right then and there. Well, the Epistle of Barnabas is not that I embrace this as inspired of a work, but it's evidence that many would have believed possible that Messiah would not return for a period of 2,000 years from their time, which, mind you, brings us to where we are now in history, a 2,000 year block of time. A lot of these preterists, and also the view that a literal 1,000 year reign of Christ happened after 70 AD, like after Jerusalem was destroyed. Then there was this Tartarian type of civilization. Again, another thing, when we look at the history and the so-called church fathers' writings and those who shook hands with the apostles and their writings, we have no hint of that. It's just a shot in the dark kind of theory with really no evidence. And when we look at these, we will see that these preterist theories just fall to the ground. And this is going to be Eusebius' narrative concerning John the Apostle will also confirm. At that time, the apostle and evangelist John, the one whom Jesus loved, we know to be John, put his head on his bosom at the Last Supper, was still living in Asia and governing the churches of that region, having returned after the death of Domitian from his exile on the island. So Eusebius, another ecclesiastical history, a church historian, says it was in the reign of Emperor Domitian, and he was exiled to the Isle of Patmos. That's where John received the book of Revelation. Again, that's in the 90s AD, after 70 AD. Eusebius confirms this. Tertullian was in the time period, this says 210 AD, against Marcion. And this is later in his life. He even lived earlier in the hundreds AD. He says, the man of sin, the son of perdition, who must first be revealed before the Lord comes, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, and who is to sit in the temple of God and boast himself as being God. According indeed to our view, he is Antichrist, as it is taught us in both the ancient and the new prophecies, and by the apostle John, who says that already many false prophets have gone out into the world, the forerunners of Antichrist, who deny that Christ is come in the flesh and do not acknowledge Jesus, meaning in God the Creator. This is against Marcion the heretic. And so Tertullian, clearly 210 AD, he did not believe Antichrist had already come. Tertullian was a historicist, as all of these seem to be. Tertullian, in his treatise against the Jews, he writes, Babylon in our own John is a figure of the city Rome as being equally great and proud of her sway and triumphant over the saints. So he makes Babylon in John's book of Revelation to be Rome. So Tertullian tells us that Babylon is Rome, and then it says Hippolytus, Victorinus, Augustine, and Jerome, you know, the heavy hitters, the people who we have lots of writings from early Christians, that this is what they believed. They believed that Rome was Babylon. So we see Rome, they got that symbol of the dragon, another thing that points they would have thought as Rome as Babylon. That's what Tertullian believed, and not that it was Jerusalem and that the Antichrist already came. They didn't think that. It's just bunk. Hippolytus on Daniel, the visions of the golden image and the four beasts. Yes, the vicar of Yahushua, yeah, the papacy. He says about Daniel, now this is important, the golden head of the image is identical with the lioness. Now this goes into Daniel chapter 2. And the statue that we mentioned, we need to understand and look at this, by which the Babylonians were represented. Babylon. The golden shoulders and the arms of silver are the same with the bear. The four beasts in Daniel 7 equate to the statue of Daniel 2. Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's dream, by which the Persians and Medes are meant. The belly and thighs of brass are the leopard, by which the Greeks who ruled from Alexander onwards are intended. The legs of iron are the dreadful and terrible beast, by which the Romans who hold the empire now are meant. In Hippolytus's time, Rome was them. That was the beast now in his time, who, by the way, the 10 horns come out of that, the 10 toes. He says the toes of clay and iron are the 10 horns which are to be. So the 10 toes of the statue of Babylon equate to the 10 horns of Daniel's dream of the Roman kingdom, where the Antichrist raises up out of that, which are to be the one other little horn springing up in their midst is the Antichrist. The stone that smites the image and breaks it in pieces and fills the whole earth is Christ, who comes from heaven and brings judgment on the world. So Hippolytus in the 200s thought this was still yet to come. They lived in the time of Rome, and the 10 kingdoms still had to happen, and the Antichrist came out of the 10 kingdoms. That's what he was saying. Nothing preterist. Clement of Alexandria famously recorded that following the death of the tyrant, the Apostle John returned to Ephesus from the island of Patmos. This return is associated with the amnesty granted after the death of the Roman Emperor Domitian in 96 AD, and that's in Clement's work, Who is the Rich Man That Shall Be Saved? And Clement writes about John and explicitly noting, for when on the tyrant's death he returned to Ephesus from the Isle of Patmos, he went away, being invited to the contiguous territories. While Clement refers to the ruler simply as the tyrant, church historians, including Eusebius, identify this ruler as the Emperor Domitian, whose reign of persecution drove John into exile. So there, another one, Clement. These are all in agreement. It's like almost, it's unanimous. It's very strong. Okay, that gets to the next layer about Rome. And so I also wrote down these others that thought the Antichrist and return of Christ was yet to come. Didn't happen by 70 AD, in other words. The preterists, there's no evidence of. Hippolytus, Justin Martyr, Tertullian, Irenaeus. Some we already went over. Irenaeus having been a disciple of Polycarp, Polycarp having been a disciple of the Apostle John. Polycarp shook John's hand and learned from him. John went on after 95 AD to continue building more churches and assemblies in Ephesus, and then he died in Ephesus. And that's what church tradition, the church fathers tell us. And by the way, we have read the epistles of Ignatius, who's very early, who knew Polycarp personally. He had 7 epistles. Nothing mentioned in there that the book of Revelation was already fulfilled, that Messiah already returned, that the Antichrist already came, but really hinted that it was still future. Same with the epistle that Polycarp wrote. He, said that Messiah is yet to come and judge the living and the dead. And the 2 letters of Clement we read together on this channel, nothing about the Antichrist already arriving. This whole theory is completely absent from anything historical, as is a concept of a literal 1,000 year, what do they call that? The Satan's little season thing with the old world stuff being, and Jesus was on the earth reigning for a literal 1,000 years. No, with nothing of history, no recollection of it at all. And that's not good scholarship to make up a theory. We also have Cyprian in 258 AD. Eusebius, we already mentioned. Lactantius, 240 to 320 AD. Victorinus, 250 to 303 AD. And he says, also, John saw the apocalypse at Patmos under Domitian, another one that affirms that had to be 95 AD. Domitian was after Nero and Titus and these guys. Athanasius of Alexandria, 373 AD, says Antichrist would be a heretical ruler of the Roman Empire. They were historicists. They thought Antichrist was coming out of the Roman Empire as a heretical replacement of Christ. Cyril of Jerusalem, 313 to 386 AD. Antichrist will usurp the government of the Roman Empire and call himself Christ. And that was before the papacy got established in it as a real powerhouse. Evagrius Ponticus, 345 to 399 AD. John Chrysostom, 347 to 407 AD. Jerome, we already mentioned, 331 to 420 AD. None of these so-called church fathers in their writings said anything about Messiah, that he already came, and that the events of Revelation already took place, and that Jerusalem was Babylon, and the Antichrist came and was in that temple and had been none of them believe this. John received the apocalypse under Domitian. That's Jerome says. Another one. The 11th horn is Antichrist, Jerome says. So that's of the 10 horns, the little horn. The little horn is Antichrist. Sulpicius Severus, 363 to 425 AD. The Venerable Bede, or Bede, 672 to 735 AD, says Domitian boiled John in oil, and that he survived it. Domitian, because of protection from Yah. I don't know, this is just what he said, that he tried to boil John alive in oil, and the Apostle John just survived it untouched. So those are my notes, and let's try to get to chapter 13 here. That took me a good while. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. So here is this dreadful beast. 7 heads, 10 horns, with the 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And this in the Et Sefer cross references Daniel 7:3 to connect this to the 4th beast, which we will maybe look at in a minute here. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority, And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. So there again, that connects us to 42 months in the chapter 11. And so we have to be thinking at this point, this was not Jerusalem being destroyed by 70 AD. The book was written 25 years later after those events. So Preterism is debunked. It's false. So we're left with, well, this could be a future Jerusalem rebuilt and maybe a third temple. Or the historicism view, which makes, again, these have to be symbolic. These visions have to be symbolic, and we have to interpret the symbols. And that's the case. And we see that they were historicists. These early so-called church fathers, their view was historicism. The way they interpreted these beasts, who is the governments of the world kingdoms are beasts. It's not even just one man. A beast is not just a man. Rather, a beast is a whole governmental world empire, the world kingdom, the Babylon that dominates the world, the most powerful empire that has control of the world. That is the beast. And so this begins to show us, well, how we can think of the United States today as the beast. And we're going to see that a second beast comes up after this great, terrible, dreadful beast, which directly has the same characteristics as the beast of Daniel, with the 7 heads and 10 horns, who all of these church fathers were historicists about. They thought it was Rome, and they thought it was going to come out of Rome. That's what they believed historically, and they didn't think the Antichrist had already come. And they knew the apostles personally. John lived on long after 70 AD. Oh, Messiah came and he left his beloved apostle John behind. He didn't take John up to heaven. You know, it makes no sense at all. So it had to be this has to have been yet to be fulfilled beyond 70 AD. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Yahuwah, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the Kodeshim, the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the Sefer of life, the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. here is the patience and the belief of the Kodeshim. Boiling by oil, yep. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. This is another beast. So if we think of Rome, and remember the iron of the toes, that all that never goes away. But there's a second beast that John sees come up. And I believe this to be America rising towards the end of a period of domination of the Roman papacy. And the papacy being the seat of Antichrist. The seat, Antichrist is a seat. That's a little horn, a little city that ruled and dominated the world. And then in 1776, the US of A is this beast. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon, and he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And the papacy never did go away, even though Napoleon conquered and captured the Pope Pius in the 1700s. But at the Lateran Treaty, some people think of that as the Pope was restored to power in 1929. So the Pope remains, and this second beast gives back power to Rome. America is more of Rome. We give it the Gregorian calendar, the same fake Christian days of celebration, Christmas and Easter and Sunday blue laws of churchianity, all the things that the papacy in Rome established in the first place. So the worship is given back to the first beast. And he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Think of that as artillery. And deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And so, and then it gets to the mark of the beast. I'm going to save that. Let's not get to the mark of the beast yet. Let's save that for tomorrow. Let's look at Daniel 2. Okay, when we want to know Babylon, we have to know the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. And it says, the 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of strength the strength of iron. For as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdoms shall be partly strong and partly broken. So there's 10 toes. And Hippolytus said that, right, there's 2 legs of iron, and Rome is divided to western and eastern. It's just really important to know this. We see it here. And here's one graphic I had. The head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar, equates to the lion beast of Daniel 7. And that's gold. And then silver, Medo-Persian Empire, equates to the bear that had 3 ribs in his mouth, because Medo-Persia conquered Egypt, Babylon, and Lydia, I believe it was. And then came the leopard beast, which is the brass loins, thighs area, the Grecian Empire and Alexander the Great. And this is well established by theologians, by the way, and just observance of history. And then that was the leopard beast, which had 4 heads, and that involved 4, after Alexander the Great, was 4 kings. One I know was the Seleucids, and Ptolemy, and Lysimachus, and Cassander were the Grecian domination. And then the Iron Legs, that's Rome, which begins in 26 BC. Rome takes over. In the New Testament times, Rome is the beast, and they will become divided into 2, Eastern and Western Rome, the divided Roman Empire. It says it starts at 30 BC. And the iron never goes away all the way to the end. Yeah, the 4 generals. Thank you, Windfeather. So Daniel 7 is where he has the vision of the 4 beasts. I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. There's that iron. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So again, we have the iron, we have the 10 horns, we have this dreadful and terrible beast that we have to connect this, of course, to what else does it say? Okay, the leopard with the 4 heads, and then the dreadful, terrible beast. So the 7 heads and 10 horns. I believe the 7 heads to be 7 governments, and then the 10 horns, or 10 kingdoms, arise out of that. Now, futurists will just say 10 kingdoms sometime yet to happen are going to give their power to the Antichrist, yet to happen, whereas historicists see this as having already happened. And here's a little bit better of a graphic that I had found of the same thing we just talked about. Messiah comes back and destroys the feet and the statue, and so that's Messiah's second coming. But we need to understand a few things. Let's see real quick. So Rome basically started around 30 BC, let's say, and was the beast in Messiah's time. All the world was taxed under Caesar Augustus. The emperor ruled from Rome, and that's the Roman Empire. And they had an emperor in Rome who was in charge of everything. And that went on until around 300 AD, and then power shifted, and Constantine took the Roman Empire, and he established up what will be the Byzantine Empire, or the Eastern Roman Empire, and Rome became divided. There was still an emperor in Rome, but Constantine renamed the Byzantine as Constantinople, and that was where Rome stopped brutally persecuting the followers of the way, and they blended Christianity with pagan Rome. They made it one thing, and Constantine was a sun worshiper. And so that started around 330 AD, as we know. And that went on until around 476 AD, when the Roman emperors were conquered down in Rome, and that put an end to that. But Eastern Rome and Constantinople, which was called New Rome, they actually called Constantinople New Rome, so it was still Rome, it was still the Roman Empire, and they would continue on in Constantinople in New Rome until the 1400s, when the Ottomans, the Turks, and Islam conquered them and became in the 1440s AD. And they ruled from Constantinople, but they called it Istanbul, interestingly. So Islam and the Ottoman Empire is still connected to Rome. How about that? And we get Friday worship by Islam established. So both Friday, the 6th day, which Islam observes, and Sunday, the 1st day of the week, which Christianity observes, both came from the same place of New Rome. But Rome, the actual old Rome, all roads lead to Rome, a process took place in around 538 BC. The papacy began to gain that, they became that city to dominate the church and be the head bishop of the Christian church of the world. That was established at 538 BC. And this is a historicist prophetic interpretation. It claims the papacy ruled as the biblical Antichrist for 1260 years, so it was a seat, and the saints were persecuted under the Pope, beginning when Emperor Justinian granted the Pope civil supremacy and ending with Napoleon's capture of Pope Pius in 1798. So that, and of course the Protestant Reformation began and protested the papacy, and there was a counter-reformation that Rome tried to, the reformers recognized that they were the Antichrist, and this is what all the Protestant organizations established, and it's even in ancient writings of theirs. And in the Inquisition, yes, there was the Inquisition, the Counter-Reformation, and I believe the positions of Preterism and Futurism were established by Jesuits. And the Jesuits tried to infiltrate and establish doctrines that would keep away the focus from who the Protestant reformers recognized that Revelation was pointing to the papacy as the Antichrist power. And now we're back to the lukewarm church age, where people just, it's just all off in the future. Don't point fingers at anybody. The little horn of Daniel 7, the papacy rose to power in Western Europe following the collapse of the Roman Empire, which fragmented into 10 Germanic kingdoms. So basically Europe and the Western Roman Empire. It's a divided Rome. The Eastern was Constantinople, and the Pope rose out of basically Europe, what we think of as Europe. And the 10 kingdoms were these 10 Germanic kingdoms that the Pope, the little horn, rose out of, and plucked up 3 of them. Heruli in AD 493, the Vandals in AD 534, the Ostrogoths in AD 538. Those 3 of the 10 were plucked up, but those were the 10 kingdoms that the little horn, the papacy, rose out of. I mean, this was how they were, the Protestant reformers were recognizing that the papacy was the seat of Antichrist. The Roman Empire's split was drawn out process, not a single event, evolving from early administrative divisions to a permanent separation. The first division was 286 AD, a permanent split in 395 AD. So 2 legs of iron, divided Rome. And Rome never goes away. Even Islam is the tentacles of Babylon, Rome. And of course, what comes out of Britain and Europe? America, the New World, the second beast. And so we're still attached to Rome. The Roman Empire did not begin in Constantinople. The empire originated in the city of Rome in 27 BC. Constantinople's role as the new capital of the empire was established much later by Emperor Constantine the Great in 330 AD. The Roman Empire began in the city of Rome in 27 BC. For centuries, the city of Rome remained the absolute center of Roman power. In 324 AD, Emperor Constantine the Great chose the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium to build a new capital. It was officially inaugurated as New Rome, Constantinople, in 330 AD. The empire's division following the death of Emperor Theodosius in 395 AD was permanently split into 2 halves, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. The Western collapsed in 476 AD, and then the papacy was established as the world church power, and that's the city that rides the beast. That's Babylon. That's where this little horn comes into play. And let's see, I want to finish this up with the tentacles of Rome real quick. I know I'm over time. You don't have to stay with me over time, but this is the Candace Owens and Kent Hovind video that I thought this was interesting. I'll share real quick.
Realize it was the Catholics that started. Very few people realize it was the Catholics that started Islam. They started the whole religion purposely to try to get the Holy Land back for the Catholics. They built up the Islam. they funded Muhammad. They trained him. They sent a Catholic nun out of the monastery. They said, we want you to come out of your convent, go find a young, promising Muslim, marry him, and train him to raise up an army of Arabs to go take back the Holy Land for the Mother Church. Quite an interesting story if you want to read about that. It started to work, but then it failed because Islam got so big, they said, well, forget you Catholics, we're doing what we want. And I don't think most Muslims, which is now, what, 10, 20% of the world population, Islam, I don't think most of them know that they really started off as a front for the Catholic Church. very few people realize it was the Catholics that started.
And so when you look at these maps that people make of the Illuminati and the powers that be and how they control the world, you know, it all roads lead to Rome. You see all these little offshoots. Am I muted? You see all these little offshoots from the Illuminati maps, and you know, people think, well, Babylon and the Antichrist, it has to be in the land of Shinar, and it's got to be a Muslim guy that comes in as the Antichrist. You know, oh, that's just obviously who's against the Jews in Israel, all that tension in Middle East. And so you'll see people say the Muslims and the Arabs are the Antichrist power, and that's Babylon. I hate to tell you, but they're just another extension of Rome. That's just more of the tentacles of Rome. And that's something I'd not heard until recently, that the Roman Catholic Church actually began Islam and it kind of turned against them. That a Catholic nun would marry Muhammad, and I don't know a lot about that story, but again, where did Islam really reign from? New Rome, Constantinople. And so again, it's all part of Babylon, it's all part of Rome. The iron never goes away. And then one more thing to share, if you can still hear me. This was pretty crazy, and this just ties it all together. And I was like, wow, this is maybe the exclamation point of the whole night of what I'm about to share. This is a big deal. I was driving down the highway on my way just back, this time from South Carolina to Georgia, just this past time on the highway, and I saw a big billboard and on the highway. And here's what the billboard was. I thought, this was huge. This was a big deal. And it's on Fox Carolina, did a thing on it. Fox News. And the billboard said, beware falseprophet.org. And it had the picture of Trump on it. And I said, oh my, it's off I-85. That's where I always drive back and forth on Highway 85. And I thought, people are catching on. And, you know, this is how you can have Rome and the second beast, America. And who is the head of America? I believe the little horn can really extend to the leader of the United States, because Trump is a type of a little horn. And it said, beware falseprophet.org with the website. And so I looked that up, and I read the whole thing, and I would encourage other people to read this whole thing. It's one page. You just scroll. You don't go to any other pages. You just scroll on this one page, falseprophet.org. And I thought, wow, these are all Christian people mostly speaking out, but they're not all Christian. They could be, they don't represent any organization. And I thought, wow, a lot of big name leaders were calling out Trump, that after he started the war in Iran, they were in disagreement. And the Pope himself apparently said something about peace, peace. And so that the Catholic Church and the Pope were openly disagreeing. And it's all on this page. And basically it shows the picture of Trump that he recently put on social media, a picture of himself making himself look like the Messiah, and that's what the whole thing is all about. This was just started back in April. He posted himself as Jesus, then he attacked the Pope for preaching peace. So Trump is in kind of this battle with the Catholic Church, and J.D. Vance is Catholic, and J.D. Vance, the vice president, rebuked the Pope. However, a lot of politicians and leaders on the scene were saying this was completely inappropriate for Trump to make himself look like Jesus Christ, look like Messiah. And Trump is he's a false prophet at the very least, and he is very skilled at lying, and demon possessed is what a lot of these testimonies are even saying. It's just unprecedented for him to just out of nowhere start this war. And then at Easter, Orthodox Easter, he posts this image of himself as if he's the Savior and the Messiah. And I read all these testimonies of it's blasphemous. It's blasphemous. And I couldn't believe it. I would encourage everyone to go to this website, read the whole thing. It's all from him posting this image. And so apparently there's a debacle between Trump and the Pope in Rome. And, you know, this is, they say, the first American Pope, interestingly. I think he's from Illinois. And there's a lot of turmoil there. I think that is really interesting to think about. I mean, I don't know what's going to come of it, but they're making a lot of noise about this, and Trump lied, and he said he thought he looked like it was the Red Cross and that he was a doctor. So no apology from Trump. He took the image down, and he said that he thought that he was Red Cross and a doctor. You know, I mean, it's, you know, what a lie. And he's good at it. And so, yeah, just read that whole thing if you get the chance. I really encourage it. It really opened my eyes, and it made me see the major turmoil. And Crazy Chicken Boy, well, he said he doesn't need to ask for forgiveness. And so, yeah, I mean, he doesn't believe he needs to ask for forgiveness, so why would he ask for forgiveness? Exactly. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He says, I just try to do better. So he wouldn't ask for forgiveness. He would just lie and say, oh, I thought I looked like a doctor, and take it down. And of course, he's been honored by Israel as the Prince of Peace. So I was just really blown away to drive down the highway and see that billboard. I think Elizabeth said you saw a billboard out your way as well. I mean, this is some organization, not for profit, that they were reached out to, but they wouldn't comment about it. They wouldn't give any more information about who they were, but it seems to be a lot of angry Catholic people. There's a lot of unhappy Catholic people, and we know they have a lot of money and funds, and they are exposing Trump as a false prophet. So this is getting very interesting, and so we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you for being here, everybody, and we'll do the Mark of the Beast tomorrow night, and that will be another good one. Blessings to everyone in Yahushua HaMashiach's name. May Yah be with us in these times of turmoil, and bless and protect us and help us keep the commandments and the Torah and the mitzvot and the faith of Yahushua HaMashiach. Amen.